If you enjoy these stories and want more, check out my Patreon. As a patron, you will receive early access to my podcast episodes every day. You will also be able to access my catalog of bonus episodes exclusively available only on my Patreon. Most importantly, your support helps me create more quality content. Now back to the story. I work with furious intensity at the small window, trying to fit the tip of the screwdriver into the small slot on the window hinge. Behind me, at the door, a crazed mob works to break into the room, to get in here, to kill us all. We've pulled stacks of chairs in front of the door to hold them, but it won't work for much longer. There are too many of them. Janet Fuller and Linda Amaro brace themselves against the stacks of chairs, fighting against the mob. Helen Fuller, who's only 16, watches me work. She's the only one who can fit through the narrow basement window, the only one who can get out to get help. Perez Amaro stands by with the small crowbar in hand. But we need to do this without breaking the window, without broadcasting to the people out in the hall what we're up to. Blood drips down into my right eye, making me effectively blind. My left eye radiates pain, and half of my vision goes in and out of focus as I blink. I'm afraid I won't ever be able to see well out of that eye again. But there are bigger things to worry about, like my life, and the lives of the 4 other people in the room. I wipe at my right eye with the back of my hand, clearing the blood and allowing me to see slightly better. My hands shake, and I can't seem to unlock the hinge with the tip of the screwdriver. My fine motor skills are shot. Too much fear, too much panic and adrenaline and disbelief. But if I can't get this window open all the way, we'll all die. I toss the screwdriver down in frustration and put my hand out for the crowbar. Perez slaps the tool into my hand. I try not to think about how long it will take for Helen to get help. By the time she does, the rest of us will surely be dead. But it's something. Saving her life is something. The sound of the doorbell brings me out of my book. I look over at my wife, who's lying on the couch with her legs propped on my thighs. Her eyebrows go up over her hazel eyes as she lays her book on her chest. "You expecting someone?" she says. I shake my head, putting my book down. "Nope. I'll see who it is."
"I'll get it,"
Brandon calls from upstairs. The declaration is followed by the sound of his hurried footsteps on the stairs.
"No, you will not,"
June calls, lifting her legs so I can stand up. I glance at the clocks as I move out of the den and through the kitchen. It's 7 after 10 on a Saturday night, much later than we're used to having visitors. As I turn the corner into the entryway, I see Brandon with his hand on the doorknob.
"Didn't you hear your mother?"
I ask him. He freezes and looks over his shoulder at me, a mischievous grin on his face. One upper tooth is missing, having fallen out 3 days ago. The tooth fairy gave him a whopping $5 for it. I guess the tooth fairy is made of money.
"Come here, you little jack-o'-lantern,"
I say to him. He steps away from the door just as the doorbell rings again, testing my patience.
"I'm coming,"
I call out.
"Hold on."
Turning my attention to my son, I say, "What did we tell you about answering the door by yourself?" His grin fades, but a smirk stays on his face.
"I'm old enough."
"You're old enough when we say you're old enough," I tell him. "Now, go get ready for bed. You should already be in your pajamas." Brandon runs to the staircase, but I hear him stop to see who's at the door. He's at that age where boundless energy meets unbridled curiosity, which means headaches for mom and dad. I peer through the peephole before unlocking and opening the door. Luke Richards looks up at me with worried eyes. He fidgets on the stoop, small bugs whirling around his head and bouncing off the porch light. "Ethan," he says, "I need to talk to you."
"Hey, Luke,"
I say.
"Been a while. Come on in."
Luke glances over his shoulder at the quiet street. Modest houses with glowing windows sit peacefully, their residents inside, enjoying the weekend night. Luke steps through the door, playing with the zipper pull tab on his light jacket. As we move toward the kitchen, June appears and says hello. "Hey," Luke says simply, barely looking her in the eye. Then he turns to me and says, "Can we talk in private?"
Sure,
I say.
of course. Let's go to my office.
As we turn down the hallway, I shrug in answer to my wife's questioning look. There's an armchair in my office that Luke sits in. I pull out my desk chair and sit in it, turning it to face him.
What's going on? Everything okay?
I ask. I need to ask you a favor, Luke says.
Okay. What is it?
Come to church tomorrow, Luke says. Please. I sit back in my chair.
Luke, you know how I feel about Pastor Paul, and you know how he feels about me. I don't think it's a good idea.
Please, Ethan, Luke says, scooting forward to the edge of his seat. Please. This is important to me.
You've what?
I prompt. I've had a vision. I know you don't believe in that stuff, but I've been praying about it ever since. You just need to be there tomorrow.
It's not that I don't believe in it,
I tell him.
It's just that I don't agree with the way Pastor Paul goes about his teachings. He's more of a politician than a spiritual leader.
I know, Lucas says. And he's been changing lately. That's why I want you to come. I want you to see for yourself, please. I take a deep breath, considering. It's really not a lot to ask. I haven't been to church in a while. Most Sundays, June, Brandon, and I do our own little worship session. And I like that better than going and sitting in church. I certainly know Brandon likes it better. And he seems to pay more attention. He seems to absorb things. But it wouldn't hurt to go back just once, to see what all the fuss is about.
Do you want to tell me about your vision?
I ask Luke. He shakes his head. It wouldn't make much sense to you. But will you come?
Yeah,
I say.
I'll come.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Ethan. You don't know what this means to me.
Of course,
I say.
Now, tell me how you've been, Luke. I feel like we haven't talked in a long while.
Yeah, Luke says, clearly relaxing slightly now that I've said yes. Things have been okay. Just really focusing on my faith since the divorce. I nod.
That's good. Do you want a beer or anything?
No, he says, standing. No, I should go now. It's late.
Okay. You sure you don't want to tell me about your vision?
I'm sure, he says. But you'll be there tomorrow, right?
I will, yeah. I'll bring June and Brandon along too.
No, Luke says, nearly shouting.
Whoa, what is going on with you, Luke? Are you sure you're okay?
I'm fine. Just don't bring them, okay? Just come alone. I study him for a long moment. He returns my gaze.
Is this something I need to be worried about?
I ask him. No, he says. No. How long have we known each other? I wouldn't steer you wrong. This will all make sense tomorrow, I promise. Just come by yourself, 9 o'clock.
Okay,
I'll be there.
alone, that's what you want.
It is. I walk Luke out and say goodnight, watching after him as he moves down the sidewalk in the direction of his small apartment building, 4 blocks away. As I shut the door, June comes down the stairs wearing mismatched pajamas.
What was that about?
She asks. I can smell the toothpaste on her breath.
I don't really know. I haven't seen Luke like that since Maureen filed for divorce. He was acting real strange, but he practically begged me to come to church tomorrow, alone.
June raises an eyebrow in question.
Huh,
she says.
Well, you're welcome to it. I don't want to hear Pastor Paul spout his nonsense for an hour. I hear he's only gotten worse. Who said that? Oh, Tabby. She said she stopped going when he started doing these long, crazy rants about politics. Sounds about right,
I say.
Well, you and Brandon can have your own little session while I'm gone. We will,
June says with a smile.
I'll get to read the Bible to Brandon for a change. No offense, but you're a boring reader. Boring?
I gasp.
How dare you?
I reach out to tickle her. She laughs and bolts back up the stairs as I chase her. The New Endeavor Church looks different as I pull into the parking lot at 8:50 on Sunday morning. They've done something to the windows that I can't quite place. They look as if they've been replaced, but I could be wrong. It has been a while since I've been here or driven past. The church is a simple rectangular brick building with a pointed roof. 4 windows line each side of the structure. The front doors are large, heavy, and wooden, with small, ornate windows at head height. The parking lot isn't full, but there are plenty of cars. I imagine that the pews will be about 3/4 full when the service starts. As I park my car, I look around for signs of Luke. I don't see him, and I don't see his SUV either. Then again, I am 10 minutes early. Several people glare at me as I walk toward the doors. I try not to take it personally, but that's easier said than done. I definitely get the feeling I'm not wanted here. This is strange, because I've never been one to talk trash behind someone's back. Luke knows about my feelings for Pastor Paul because our families used to attend church together every Sunday. And when June and I made the decision to stop, I explained our feelings to him, but I didn't go around town denouncing the church. Of course, not showing up anymore is a denunciation in itself, I suppose. Still, I have a very odd feeling as I walk to the doors. There are a couple of greeters there, Mac Pollard and Susie Libsam. They smile and say hello to the people ahead of me, but as soon as they see me, their expressions falter. Mac, a graying man with large teeth and a sizable mole on his forehead, steps in front of the door.
"Hey, Ethan," he says.
"What are you doing here?" I smile, thinking it's a joke. But when I look between him and Susie, I see that it's not.
I was hoping to attend the service,
I say, keeping the smile on my face with some effort.
"Really?"
Mac asks.
"Why the sudden change of heart?"
Luke invited me,
I say.
But why does that matter? Is this a closed session now? Do I need to know a secret password?
Mac glances over at Susie, who's a severe-looking middle-aged woman with sharp features and bottle blonde hair. There are people piling up behind me on the walkway, many of them murmuring. Susie seems to shrug with her eyes as she looks back at Mac. The man turns toward me, smiles, and steps aside.
"Don't forget to put your phone in the box,"
he says, gesturing just inside the doors. I pause.
What?
"Oh, yeah.
He says.
I guess we enacted that policy since you left. No phones allowed in the nave anymore. Pastor Paul doesn't want anyone distracted from God. Most folks just leave theirs at home or in the car, but we still have the box for those who don't."
Sure enough, I step inside and see a decorated box sitting on a table. There are about a dozen phones sitting inside. Reluctantly, I take my phone out and put it inside.
"Glad to have you back,"
Max says in a tone that suggests the opposite.
Thanks,
I say. What in the hell is going on here? I think as I walk through the entryway. To my left and right are stairs leading up to the balcony seating area, but there won't be enough people inside to warrant their use. I move through the entryway and into the main room, the nave. The first thing I notice is the closed shutters over the interior windows. They're heavy-duty metal shutters secured with padlocks. Since they aren't allowing any sunlight in, the only illumination in the place comes from the recessed lights overhead in the peaked ceiling. It gives the space a solemn atmosphere. People dressed in their Sunday best are getting comfortable in the pews. A few people stand in the center aisle, chatting. Several kids goof around on the outskirts of the pews.
"Ethan!"
A man calls out from the middle of the right row of pews. It's Ralph Fuller, a guy I work with at Elite Heating and Air Conditioning. He's here with his family and he smiles and waves. I raise a hand in greeting as he gestures me over.
"Good to see you back in church,"
he says. I say hello to his wife, Janet, and their sullen teenage daughter, Helen, before taking a seat next to Ralph.
"What brings you back?"
Ralph asks. Sensing eyes on me, I look over my shoulder without answering. The youth ministry leader, a serious and well-kempt man named Keenan Delaney, stands near the open nave doors, staring at me as Mac whispers in his ear. He wears starched and pressed khaki pants with a powder blue long-sleeve shirt. Keenan nods at Mac and then hurries through the nave, heading toward the rooms at the back of the church.
"What's wrong?"
Ralph asks.
Huh? Oh, nothing.
I say, turning back.
I'm here as a favor to Luke, actually. He asked me to come today.
Ralph An always happy man with a balding head and small green eyes mulls that over for a moment.
Luke Richards?
He asks.
Yep.
Something passes over Ralph's face, but I can't place it.
What's up?
I ask him.
What?
Ralph says.
The mention of Luke Richards gave you pause.
I say.
Something going on with him?
Ralph shrugs.
No, not that I know of. Maybe you're reading into things.
I study him for a moment before agreeing.
Yeah, maybe. He should be here. He's here every Sunday, especially since the divorce. I'm saving a seat for him right here.
I say, patting the stretch of pew to my left.
Sounds good.
Ralph says with a smile.
Hey, what's with the window shutters?
I ask him. He looks up at the nearest shuttered windows and laughs once.
Yeah, pretty intense looking, right? I heard there was a break-in last week after services. Someone stole the collection money, so they put the shutters up to keep it from happening again. They also replaced some of the doors.
As Ralph says this, he points a thumb over his shoulder. I follow, looking at the propped open nave doors. Sure enough, they're heavy-duty metal doors. They used to be simple wooden ones.
Makes sense, I guess.
I say.
But why are the shutters still closed and locked? Wouldn't they open them for some sunlight during the service?
Ralph shrugs.
You'd think so.
He says.
Maybe someone forgot.
9 o'clock comes and goes, but Pastor Paul doesn't come out. The crowd sits patiently, waiting for the service to start. People chat quietly. Ralph and I talk a bit about work. I joke around a little with Helen, getting a reluctant smile out of the 16-year-old. Then the sound of the closing nave doors catches my attention. I turn to see Mac shutting the doors. He does something else with them after they're closed. It almost looks like he's locking them, but that can't be right. When he turns around, his eyes flick over to me. When he sees me looking, his eyes bounce away. He doesn't move from in front of the doors. He stands there, looking straight ahead. Where's Luke? I wonder. My bowels clench like a coiling snake. I ignore the feeling. One of the two doors flanking the stage opens, and Pastor Paul walks out. Cheers go up from a few people in the crowd, which is something that certainly didn't happen when I used to go here. He's a tall man with a straight back, a head of short and neatly trimmed brown blonde hair, and a brown goatee. His eyes are lively and bright, almost turquoise in color. Paul wears expensive-looking black slacks and a purple dress shirt with a crisp white collar. He wears a gold chain with a cross on it under the collar, like a tie. His black dress shoes are shiny. As he steps up on stage, he smiles, holding up a battered Bible until he stops at the podium. His eyes move over the crowd as he sets the Bible down. They move over me easily, like he's not surprised at all to see me here. I don't know why I expected to see surprise on his face. Maybe because I saw it on Mac's and Susie's and Keenan's. Then I remember Keenan hurrying to the back of the church. Maybe he told Pastor Paul that I was here. But why would he do that? The crowd goes quiet, the cheers fading away as Paul's eyes drag across his congregation.
Be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might.
He begins without preamble.
Put on the whole armor of God, that you might be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places.
He pauses, sweat already glistening on his forehead.
Do you know what that means?
He shouts.
Are you familiar not with the words from the book of Ephesians, but also with the meaning and the power and the purpose behind them? Tell us!
A woman shouts.
We're ready!
A man yells out. I wonder why they sound so angry. Not only Pastor Paul, but those who call out too. Their voices are heavy with rage. The mood is tense here. I realize this isn't just another Sunday. This is a continuation of something Paul has been discussing for some time. But I also see that not everyone is in on it. Many other people glance around, looking confused or worried.
It means, brothers and sisters,
Paul says,
that the time has come. Amen!
A man shouts.
Hallelujah!
A woman says.
I have been speaking with God a lot lately.
Paul continues in a forceful voice. He doesn't use a microphone. He doesn't need one.
He has deemed me worthy enough to talk with. And he's told me many, many wonderful things about all of you.
More shouts of affirmation come from the crowd.
Well,
Paul says, stepping away from the podium.
almost all of you.
The crowd goes silent. Paul paces on stage.
You see, most of you have Jesus in your hearts and in your souls. Most of you have been willing to give yourself over to him, but not all of you. And that's what God has been talking to me about.
He pauses, looking around.
He told me that demons have worked their way into my congregation.
Hissing and booing come from various sections of the crowd.
He told me that if I were to do nothing about it, every single one of you would become infested by the demonic plague worming its way into this church, this community, this state, and this country.
Pained moans erupt. I look around, seeing that many of the people in the crowd are getting into it. This is certainly much more intense than I remember Pastor Paul being.
He told me that the way we've been doing things is no longer enough. He told me that I must root out the demons in this room, and he told me how I must do it.
I look over at Ralph, who glances back at me, a worried expression on his face.
Has he ever talked about demons in the congregation before?
I whisper. Ralph just shakes his head.
You've all seen it.
Paul shouts, pacing on the stage once again.
Every time you turn on your television, every time you look out your window, every time you get on your phone or your computer, you are confronted with the tools of Satan. The tools are all around us. They're multiplying every day, and we're quickly becoming outnumbered. And do you know why? Why?
Several people shout at once.
Because we've been fighting the war all wrong. We've been doing battle in the hearts and minds of the people. But it's not working. It's not working. And God has had enough. He's had enough, and he's told me that we have to take the fight up a notch. We have to put our foot down and say, "No more, Satan. We will not fall prey to your trickery. We've had enough, and we have God on our side."
A dozen people are standing now, swaying and shouting and holding their hands up toward the stage, as if absorbing the energy pouring off Pastor Paul.
The Bible tells us clearly in Timothy.
Paul shouts.
It says, "Now the Spirit speaketh expressly, that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils." Well, I'm here to tell you that the Bible was right, and that the latter times are now. But I need your help. God needs your help. Who's willing to do what it takes to bring about the kingdom of heaven on earth?
About half of the crowd is standing now, shouting and convulsing in agreement with Pastor Paul. Most of the rest of us are glancing around at each other, wondering what will come next.
Those that stand against us are agents of the devil.
Paul shouts from the stage.
Let them not interfere with the Lord's work. Let them not interfere as you bring me the demon posing as Ethan Fortner.
He levels his finger at me from the stage. Every head in the place turns to look at me. If you want to support the podcast and help me continue to provide the best horror stories, feel free to sign up to my Patreon. Here you will receive early access to all of my podcast episodes. You will also get access to my archive of over 50 bonus episodes. Thank you. Now back to the story. Before I can think of something to say, several men and women are moving toward me, their faces hard with determination. I glance at Ralph, who has a terrified look on his face. His mouth hangs open.
He's been sent here by the demon Luke Richards.
Paul shouts.
Whosoever stands with him stands against God. No,
I say, standing up and tensing. They're coming from all directions.
no, this is crazy. Don't listen to the demon's words.
Pastor Paul shouts.
It'll say anything to get out of being sent back to hell. But fear them not. The demons have no power in this house of God.
The first man to get to me is Keenan, the youth pastor.
Keenan, you don't really believe this, do you?
I ask him, taking a step back from the aisle. But I can hear other people working their way toward me from behind, squeezing toward Ralph and his family. Keenan doesn't answer me. His eyes are flat, his jaw tensed. God, help me, I think as Keenan steps toward me, his hands held out in front of him. I hear the sound of a fist striking flesh, followed quickly by a sharp exhalation. Backing away from Keenan, I risk a glance over my shoulder just in time to see Ralph throw another punch at the man who was flanking me. The man collapses, and Ralph steps over him.
This way,
He says to me and his family. The violence seems to give Keenan pause. As I turn my head toward him, he's staring past me at the man on the floor. The church is silent for a good 10 seconds. The only people moving are me and the Fuller family. It's like everyone's waiting to see what everyone else will do. Pastor Paul is on stage, frozen with his face up toward the heavens, his arm cast skyward.
let us out, Mac.
I say as we get to the nave doors, the ones Mac locked just before the service started. Mac swivels his head from me to Pastor Paul.
We just want to leave, Mac.
I whisper, pleading.
Just let us leave.
Mac ignores me, his eyes fixed on his spiritual leader. Unable to help myself, I turn my own eyes that way, seeing that the whole congregation has done the same. Everyone except the man Ralph knocked out with his 2 punches. Paul is still frozen in his strange posture, but he doesn't stay that way for long. His head comes down to face forward again, but his arms stay up. His face is flushed pink, a series of veins standing out at his temples and on his forehead. His cheeks shake as his head vibrates. His eyes are nearly blinding in their ferocity. He's insane, I think.
Get them!
He screams.
Get the black-eyed demons!
Chaos erupts in the nave as half the congregation rushes towards us while the other half, apparently still in possession of their senses, tries to stop them. Some people argue, trying to talk sense.
Let them go! Do what he says! God is good! Demons among us! Kill the demons!
I whip around to see Mac and Ralph choking each other in front of the double doors. Janet grasps Helen, both of them frozen with fear. Stepping forward, I reach into Mac's pocket to retrieve the set of keys. As I pull the keys out, I'm hit from behind, and I slam into Ralph and Mac, hitting my head on the side of Mac's skull. The 3 of us go down, and I drop the keys in the process. There are suddenly bodies all around us. Hands reach down from the fray, sharp nails scraping across my face. Someone pulls my hair. A knee smashes into my temple. The air is filled with the sounds of violence. The scents of perfume and cologne battle with coffee breath and detergent as people go crazy. Above all the shouting and the sounds of fighting, I can hear Pastor Paul ranting and raving from the stage. He's listing the names of so-called demons in the room over and over again, prompting his people to attack them. I punch up as hard as I can, not caring who I hit. Mac and Ralph are still struggling, wrestling with each other nearby. As I back up, trying to get enough room to stand, I find the keys. It's a large ring with perhaps 24 keys on it. I grip the key ring in my hand, positioning it so several keys stick up through my fingers like claws. Punching out with the makeshift weapon, I produce some screams and create enough room to get up. As I get to my feet, I hear Janet shout,
Ralph!
She cries, nothing but fear in her voice. I look toward the source of the sound, over the heads of the brawling congregation, to see that she and Helen are being ushered back towards the same door Pastor Paul came out. A man and woman I recognize, the Amaros, are doing the ushering. A man lunges at me, and I punch him in the throat with the keys, puncturing his skin. He backs away with wide eyes gripping his throat. I swipe at another couple of guys who have their sights set on me, keeping them at bay, for now. I quickly decide that I need to get out of here and get help. I don't know if the Amaros are friends or hostiles, but Ralph's wife and daughter are on their own now. As I turn toward the door, I realize that I have no idea which key unlocks it, and there's no way I'll have time to figure it out.
Ethan!
Janet calls out.
Bring Ralph!
As I'm momentarily distracted, Keenan comes flying out of nowhere, tackling me to the ground. I land hard on my left side, but manage to hold onto the keys this time. Keenan's hands go toward my face, and he jabs a thumb into my left eye socket. I scream out, turning my head and then bucking to get him off me. He punches me in the side of the head, then goes for the eye again. I can feel his nail digging into my eyelid as he tries to gouge out my eyeball. I convulse and buck again, and this time get enough clearance to scramble away. But I don't get far before he's on me again. This time, I'm ready. I slash out with the keys in my hand, scraping them across his face. He screams out, clutching his face and falling backward. As I get up, I can only see out of my right eye. Something's wrong with my left, and I'm worried Keenan has done permanent damage. But as I look over to where Ralph and Mac were fighting, I can see well enough to know that something terrible has happened. Ralph is face down near the door, a pool of blood spreading out on the polished hardwood floor. Mac is standing now, and he slams the heel of his cowboy boot down into the back of Ralph's head. I cry out and lunge toward the older man, but it's clear to me now that the demon chasers are winning. A group of 3 men and 2 women are moving to surround me, so I run. Dashing along the back wall, I made it to the corner of the room and turn right to sprint down the aisle on the far left side of the church. An 18-year-old kid, one of the Harlow boys, tries to stop me, but I bowl him over.
Get him!
Pastor Paul is shouting from the stage, pointing at me.
The demon is escaping!
I slam against the side door Janet, Helen, and the Amaros went through, trying to open it. It's locked. I'm sure one of the keys on the key ring will open it, but I don't know which one.
Let me in!
I shout.
Let me in! It's Ethan!
Behind me, those not actively engaged with other church members are bearing down on me.
Let me in!
Just before the large group gets to me, the door opens and I slip through, shutting and locking it behind me. Janet looks up at me. Helen and the Amaras are standing huddled in the middle of the classroom.
Ralph?
Janet asks over the pounding on the door. I shake my head.
I'm sorry,
I tell her.
but we need to get out of here.
Blood drips into my right eye from where the woman scratched me. I wipe it absently away, blinking constantly for brief moments of unobstructed vision. There's another doorway in the classroom to my right, leading out to a small hallway. I'm keenly aware that the door on the other side of the nave leads to that same hallway, and I don't know if it's locked or not. If it is, Pastor Paul surely has the keys to it, just as he surely has the keys to the door I just came through. But it seems that he's too swept up in religious fervor to think rationally or logically. I can hear him shouting through the wall, screaming about demons everywhere. I look at Perez and Linda Amaro through my blurred vision. They stare back at me with wide brown eyes. They're in their 50s. Perez is dressed in a blue and white striped shirt with black slacks. Linda wears a sparkly black skirt and a blue blouse. They're looking to me for guidance. They all are.
Let's go,
I say. There is one window in this classroom, but it has the same locked shutters on it that the ones in the nave do. But I know there's an emergency exit door at the back of the building. It should let us out without needing to go through all the keys still gripped in my right fist. As we start toward the door to the hallway, the banging on the nave door stops. I pause and look over my shoulder. Pastor Paul is no longer speaking. The only thing I can hear is the low pleading from people out in the nave, begging. I swallow involuntarily, my mouth suddenly dry. The way all the noise stopped at once. It's not natural. There was no signal I heard. No one even shouted stop. They all just stopped.
Demon!
Pastor Paul shouts. I jump as a gunshot follows.
Demon! Black-eyed demon! They're killing them!
Linda screams. Silence from the nave.
Get them!
Come on!
I shout, running to the hallway door. I pull it open to reveal the staircase down to the basement just ahead. To get to the emergency exit, we need to go past the staircase to the other side of the hall, where we'll take a left down a smaller hallway to the door. But as soon as I step out into the hall, people come pouring through the other nave door. Half of them are splashed with blood, and they all look insane. They rush toward us, leaving only one way to go, downstairs. So that's where we go, running down the wooden steps and ducking into the first room we see. Chairs are stacked along 3 of the walls, and there's a storage shelf on the wall next to the door. The 5 of us get inside, and I slam the door shut, locking it from the inside. Perez immediately starts pulling stacks of chairs over, and I move to help him. People are banging on the wooden door before we get the first stack over, but they don't come through. And pretty soon, we have the door barricaded as best we can with the chairs. With that done, I look around at the two small hopper windows near the ceiling. They have hinges at the bottom, so they open from the top and tilt inward, which will make it hard for us to use them as an escape route. In fact, I can tell by looking that the only person who can fit through is Helen. It's the only option we have, because it's just a matter of time before the people at the door break through. I can already hear the door cracking as they bang on it.
Helen,
I say, going up to the frightened 16-year-old.
I need you to go get help, okay? We'll get you out one of these windows, and you flag down the first person you see and have them call the police, okay?
Helen looks up at her mom, her lip quivering. Janet takes her daughter's face in her hands and says,
You can do this. Once you get out there, you give him hell.
I find it a strange thing to say, but I shrug it off. Helen nods.
Okay,
She says, a look of determination on her face. As I put Mac's keys in my pocket, I turn around and step to the shelf near the door, finding a small crowbar among other common tools there. Perez moves, grabbing a chair and setting it under the back window. My first inclination is to smash the glass with the crowbar, but that will surely alert the mob to our plan. And if they get outside to surround us, we're all dead. I step up onto the chair and open the hopper window as wide as it will go, which isn't more than 6 inches. They're designed for ventilation and to let in light, not to have people crawl in and out. I'm sure there's some way to remove the entire window, but I have no idea how to do it. I better figure it out quickly. I swipe sweat and blood away from my right eye with the back of my hand.
Hand me the flathead screwdriver.
I tell Perez. He does, grabbing it from the shelf. Janet and Linda are pressing against the stacks of chairs barricading the door. The top left corner of the wooden door is cracked, and I can see hands shoving through, trying to remove the flimsy wood so they can reach in and topple the chairs. I hand Perez the crowbar and he hands me the screwdriver. I bring the small tool up and try to work at what looks like a locking mechanism on a hinge. But my hands are shaking so badly, I can't get the tip of the tool in the small locking mechanism. My fine motor functions are shot from the adrenaline and the pain, and it doesn't help that I can only see out of one eye. Even then, there's blood and sweat getting into it. I throw the screwdriver down and stick my hand out for the crowbar. Perez slaps it into my hand. I try not to think about how long it will take for Helen to get help. By the time she does, the rest of us will surely be dead. But it's something. Saving her life is something. I stick the curved end of the crowbar between the hinge and the frame, then yank down on the tool, trying to break the hinge arm off. It works. One hinge off, one to go. I have to get down from the chair and move it to the other side to work on the second hinge. I do the same thing, sticking the curved end between hinge and frame. I yank down, but I do it too hard. The hinge arm snaps off and the entire window falls, banging against the wall underneath and shattering the glass.
They're going out the window!
A crazed woman yells from the other side of the door.
Helen!
I shout.
Come on!
I jump down from the chair and tip it over to get the glass shards off of it. Then I put it directly underneath the window, tossing the crowbar aside in the process. Helen jumps up onto the chair. Perez and I boost her up. She gets her head and arms through fine, but her butt scrapes against the narrow frame as she goes out, leaving no doubt in my mind that she's the only one of us who can fit through there. As soon as she's out, she turns around and sticks her hand through the window.
The keys!
She says.
Give me the keys!
Thank God for you, girl, I think. I hadn't even thought about that. When the police get here, they'll need the keys to get inside. I dig them out of my pocket and hand them out to her. She takes them and darts off. I watch as she runs away. I soon lose her from view. But I hear shouting from outside in the direction she went. My heart sinks. Please, God, let her get away, I think. Please. As soon as I finish the thought, I hear screams from outside. But it's not Helen screaming, that much I know. Still, I wince as the awful, pain-filled screams reach my ears.
Help!
Perez shouts, pulling me back to reality. I turn to see him, Janet, and Linda all pressed up against the stacks of chairs barricading the door. After picking up the crowbar, I run over and put my weight and muscle into it. When I see a hand come through the broken top corner of the door, I jump up and bash it with the crowbar, keeping them from pushing the stacks over. Suddenly, the sound of semi-automatic gunfire erupts from upstairs. The people trying to break into the storage room let up slightly. There's yelling and more gunfire from upstairs, and it's getting closer.
Get down! Get down on the ground now!
A man shouts from the basement hallway. A second later, more gunshots. The thump of bodies hitting the floor is clearly audible. There's no longer anyone pushing on the door from outside.
You people okay in there?
The voice calls out.
We're okay!
Janet calls out.
Did you see my daughter?
The girl's fine.
The voice says.
She's out with my colleagues now. You can open the door. I'm a police officer.
We move the stacks of chairs away from the door and then open it to reveal a man in tactical gear with police markings.
Don't look at them,
He says to us, talking about the bodies all over the floor. But it's hard not to look. He escorts us upstairs and through the back exit. I can only imagine what the nave looks like, how many bodies are in there. But as we go around the side of the building, the same side Helen ran around, I see police officers covering yet more bodies with tarps. The thing is, these bodies weren't shot, as far as I can tell. There are limbs scattered on the grass around the church building, as if a bomb went off, or as if something tore them apart.
What happened to them?
I ask the cop.
Just keep going, sir.
He says.
Don't look at the bodies. It's all over now.
He escorts us around to the front, where I see Helen sitting in the back of an ambulance. She's covered in blood. Janet runs up to her daughter and wraps her in a hug. Helen looks over her mother's shoulder at me, and she smiles. Something happens to her eyes, like a flicker of darkness passing through them. It's so fast, and my vision is so messed up, I'm not even sure if I saw it. But the memory lingers in my mind as a paramedic comes up to check on me. The memory of a curtain of black falling over Helen's eyes. Something Pastor Paul said suddenly comes to mind. He said,
The demons have no power in this house of God.
But what about outside the house of God? I wonder. I shrug it off as I answer the paramedic's questions while she leads me to a different ambulance. But as we go, I see Luke Richards approaching from further back in the parking lot. I pull away from the paramedic and run up to him, gripping him by his shirt collar.
You knew!
I scream in his face.
You knew this was going to happen! Why'd you tell me to come?
Luke is the polar opposite of how he appeared last night. He's smirking, confident, and calm.
You just answered your own question.
Luke says.
How?
I shout, pulling him closer. I blink furiously, bringing him into clear focus for short moments at a time.
How did you know this would happen? He told me.
Jake says.
How else do you think? God?
I ask.
God told you?
Jake smirks.
It doesn't matter,
He says.
It's all done with. I told you to come because I knew. I knew you'd be the one to make sure everything turned out okay. Okay?
I scream, gesturing at the circus in front of the church.
You call this okay? People are dead. Murdered. Yes,
Luke says.
some of them are. But the important thing to remember is that your people are fine. June and Brandon at home waiting for you. And you'll be a hero. A hero who defeated a deranged pastor who went on a murder spree.
Jake pauses as he brings his lips close to my ear.
It seems that God isn't what he used to be.
I step away from him, stunned into silence.
He takes care of his own.
Luke says, smiling. And as he's turning away, something happens to his eyes, like a flicker of darkness moving through them. It's so fast, and my vision is so messed up, I'm not even sure I saw it. But the memory lingers in my mind. The memory of a flash of black covering Luke's eyes. What did Pastor Paul call them? I think black-eyed demons. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out some more of my episodes here.